Ambassador Han Minho stood at the observation deck of the UES Determination and watched the massive Galactic Council station grow larger through the reinforced glass. The station was built around a dead moon and stretched for hundreds of kilometers, in every direction. Towers and domes covered its surface like a metal city that had grown wild over thousands of years. Ships from dozens of different worlds moved in and out of the docking bays like busy insects around a hive. Minho had been preparing for this moment for 3 years. Earth had chosen him from among 200 candidates to represent humanity in the most important diplomatic mission since first contact. The Velthari Empire had been blocking human expansion into 3 star systems for the past 5 years, and tensions were getting worse every month. Human colonies needed those systems to grow and survive, but the Velthari claimed they owned them by ancient right. The Galactic Council had finally agreed to hear both sides and make a decision. Captain Park Ji-won walked up beside him and crossed her arms. She was a small woman, but everyone on the ship knew she could handle any crisis that came their way. Her dark eyes studied the station with the same careful attention she gave to everything else. "Still looks like a trap to me," she said quietly. "Too many council ships around that station and not enough neutral ones." Minho nodded but kept his expression calm. "Maybe, but we have to try diplomacy first. Earth needs those systems and we cannot take them by force without becoming the villains in this story." Dr. Kim So-min joined them at the window, at the Yao. She carried a datapad filled with information about every species they might encounter at the station. Her job was to help Minho avoid cultural mistakes that could ruin the negotiations before they started. "The Velthari delegation arrived 2 days ago," she said. "They brought 12 ships and over 300 advisors. We brought 1 ship and 5 people." "Quality over quantity," Minho replied, but he felt a small knot of worry in his stomach. The Velthari had been part of the Galactic Council for over 2,000 years. Humanity had only joined 15 years ago, and many species still saw them as dangerous newcomers who expanded too fast and asked too many questions. The Determination docked at the station 3 hours later. Minho put on his formal diplomatic uniform and checked his appearance one last time. The dark blue fabric was designed to look respectful but not submissive. Earth wanted the galaxy to see that humans were civilized beings who deserved equal treatment. The airlock opened and they stepped into the station. The main corridor was enormous and filled with beings from across the galaxy. Minho saw the tall, bird-like Karani walking alongside short reptilian Gorth. A group of Velthari moved past them with their scaled heads held high and their eyes glowing with inner light. They did not look at the human delegation. A small floating robot approached them and spoke in perfect Earth standard. "Ambassador Han Minho, your quarters have been prepared in Section 7. The preliminary hearing will begin tomorrow at local noon. Please follow the guide markers to your destination." They walked through the station for 20 minutes. The architecture was strange and beautiful, with curves and angles that human minds found hard to understand. Gardens filled with alien plants provided fresh air, and the walls showed images of peaceful worlds across the galaxy. Everything was designed to make visitors feel welcome, but Minho noticed the security cameras and the armed guards at every important intersection. Their quarters were comfortable but basic. 3 rooms with sleeping areas and a common space for meetings. Dr. Kim immediately began setting up her research equipment, while Captain Park checked the security systems. Minho sat down and reviewed his notes one more time. "The evidence is clear," he said to his team. "The 3 systems in question have been empty for at least 400 years. No Velthari settlements, no mining operations, no permanent structures of any kind. They claim ancient territorial rights but cannot provide any proof those rights exist." Dr. Kim looked up from her datapad. "The problem is not evidence. The problem is politics. The Velthari are old and powerful. Humanity is new and makes the other species nervous. They think we expand too fast and take too many risks." Captain Park finished her security check and joined them at the table. "I have been talking to other ship captains in the docking bay. Most of them think the Council has already made its decision. They are just going through the motions to make it look fair." Minho felt the knot in his stomach get tighter, but he kept his voice steady. "Then we will have to be perfect. No mistakes, no cultural errors, no signs of aggression. We will present our case with complete professionalism, and let the evidence speak for itself. The next morning, they attended a briefing session for all delegates. The council chamber was a massive dome filled with seats for over 500 beings. Each species had their own section with environmental controls suited to their needs. The humans were given 5 seats in a section marked for recent members, along with 3 other young species. Councillor Thys of the Velthari Empire stood at the central podium. He was an ancient being with scales that had turned silver, with age and eyes that burned like small stars. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. This matter concerns the expansion of aggressive species into territories that belong to the established order. The Velthari Empire has held claim to these systems since before many current species had achieved spaceflight. These claims are recognized by ancient treaty and custom. He gestured toward the human section with one clawed hand. The species known as humans arrived in our galaxy only decades ago. They have shown no respect for established boundaries or traditional claims. They take what they want and ask permission later. This behavior threatens the peace and stability that the Council has maintained for millennia. Minho listened carefully and took notes. Everything Thys said was technically true, but it ignored important context. Humans had been expanding quickly, but they had followed all Council regulations and purchased rights to uninhabited systems through proper legal channels. The 3 disputed systems had been offered for sale by the Council itself. When it was his turn to speak, Minho walked to the podium with confident steps. He activated the holographic display and showed detailed scans of all 3 systems. Honored councilors, these systems have been uninhabited for centuries. Our surveys found no structures, no settlements, no signs of recent activity by any species. When humanity purchased expansion rights to these systems through official council channels, we were told they were available for development. The display showed orbital paths, mining locations, and planned colony sites. Everything was designed to have minimal environmental impact and maximum efficiency. We are not taking these systems by force. We purchased them legally, and we intend to develop them responsibly. If the Velthari have legitimate claims to these territories, we respectfully ask them to provide evidence of those claims. Councillor Thys stood up and his eyes flared brighter. Evidence, he said with contempt. The Velthari Empire does not need to provide evidence to newcomers. Our claims are based on traditions older than your species. The Council recognizes ancient rights over recent purchases. Minho felt a chill run down his spine. This was not about evidence or law. This was about power and tradition. The Council was going to side with the Velthari simply because they were older and more established. Humanity was being judged not on their actions but on their status as newcomers. Dr. Kim passed him a note that said, "Stay calm, do not show anger, that is what they expect." Minho took a deep breath and returned to his seat. The preliminary hearing continued for 3 more hours. Other council members asked questions, but most of them seemed designed to make humanity look aggressive and impatient. No one asked about the actual evidence. No one questioned the Velthari claims. When the session ended, Councillor Thys announced that the final hearing would take place in 3 days. The Council will render judgment on this matter, and all parties will accept that judgment as final. There will be no appeals and no further discussion. As they walked back to their quarters, Captain Park shook her head in disgust. "This is not a trial. This is a show. They have already decided against us." Minho nodded slowly. He had been a diplomat long enough to recognize when a situation was hopeless. But Earth had sent him here to try every peaceful option before considering alternatives. He would present their case one more time and hope that justice could overcome politics. He did not know that in 3 days he would be dead, and that his death would change the galaxy forever. The final hearing began at exactly noon station time. Ambassador Han Minho walked into the council chamber wearing his best diplomatic uniform and carrying a data case filled with evidence that he hoped would save his species from an unjust decision. The chamber was packed with delegates from across the galaxy. Many species had sent observers to watch what everyone expected would be an important precedent for future expansion disputes. Captain Park Ji-won sat in the gallery section reserved for ship commanders. She had wanted to stay on the determination, but Minho had insisted that she attend the hearing. If this goes badly, someone needs to witness what happens and report back to Earth, he had told her. Now she wished she had ignored his orders and stayed with her ship. Dr. Kim So-min sat beside Captain Park with her datapad, ready to record everything. She had spent the past 3 days analyzing the political currents in the station, and what she had learned made her deeply worried. Too many species seemed afraid of humanity, and too many council members seemed eager to make an example of them. Lee Do-hyun stood near the back of the chamber with the other security chiefs. As head of human security for the diplomatic mission, he had noticed things that worried him. Velthari guards had been moving into position around the chamber all morning. Council security had added extra checkpoints and restricted access to several areas. Everything felt like preparation for something bigger than a simple hearing. Councillor Thys took his place at the central podium and called the session to order. His ancient scales gleamed under the chamber lights, and his burning eyes swept across the assembled delegates. Today the Council will render final judgment on the matter of territorial expansion rights in the Kepler Tau and Proxima sectors. This decision will stand as law throughout the galaxy. Minho was called to present humanity's final arguments. He walked to the podium with steady steps and activated the holographic display one last time. The evidence was overwhelming, and he presented it with clear logic and careful documentation. Orbital surveys proved the systems were uninhabited. Legal records showed humanity had purchased expansion rights through proper channels. Environmental studies demonstrated that human development would actually improve the systems by cleaning up old space debris and stabilizing asteroid orbits. Honored counselors, Minho said as he concluded his presentation, humanity seeks only what we have legally purchased and what we can develop responsibly. We are not aggressors or invaders. We are colonists who followed every law and regulation. We ask for justice based on evidence, not politics based on tradition. Councillor Thys listened with obvious impatience. When Minho finished, the ancient Velthari stood and gestured dismissively toward the human delegation. The Council has heard enough words from this species. They speak of law and evidence, but they ignore the deeper truth. Humanity expands too quickly and takes too much. They upset the balance that has kept peace in this galaxy for thousands of years. He paused and let his burning gaze sweep across the chamber. Other young species watch this proceeding carefully. They wonder if they too can ignore ancient claims and take whatever they desire. If the Council allows humanity to succeed here, we invite chaos throughout our territories. This activated his own holographic display showing maps of human expansion over the past 15 years. Red markers indicated every system where humans had established colonies or mining operations. The display made human growth look aggressive and threatening, even though every single expansion had been legal and approved by the Council itself. Look at this pattern of conquest, Thys continued. In 15 years, humanity has spread to over 200 systems. No species in galactic history has expanded so rapidly. They consume resources, build weapons, and ask questions later. How long before they decide that ancient Velthari territories also look attractive for development? Minho stood up to object, but Councillor Thys raised one clawed hand for silence. The human delegate has spoken enough. The Council will now deliberate and render judgment. The Council members withdrew to their private chamber, leaving the delegates waiting in uncomfortable silence. Dr. Kim checked her chronometer and whispered to Captain Park, "Deliberations usually take several hours for important cases. This feels too fast." She was right. After only 30 minutes, the Council members returned to their seats. Councillor Thys took the podium again, and his expression showed no uncertainty. The Council has reached a unanimous decision. The territorial claims of the Velthari Empire are recognized as valid and binding. Humanity must withdraw from all disputed systems. Within 30 standard days, Minho felt the words hit him like a physical blow, but he kept his expression neutral. This was the outcome he had feared, but he still had to try one final appeal. Councillor Thys, with respect, may I ask what evidence the Council considered in reaching this decision? Thys turned his burning gaze directly on Minho, and something cold and terrible flickered in those ancient eyes. "Evidence," he repeated slowly. The Council requires no evidence beyond the obvious pattern of human aggression. This species has proven itself unworthy of the trust placed in it. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Other delegates began shifting nervously in their seats as they sensed something changing in the mood of the proceedings. Captain Park felt her hand moving instinctively toward her sidearm before she remembered that weapons were forbidden in the Council chamber. Furthermore, Theiss continued, the Council finds that humanity has shown contempt for galactic law and tradition by pressing these false claims. Such behavior cannot be tolerated in civilized space. The human delegate will face punishment for crimes against galactic order. Minho blinked in surprise. Punishment, he asked. What punishment are you talking about? I followed every diplomatic protocol and presented evidence according to Council regulations. This smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression on his reptilian features. The punishment for species that threaten galactic stability has always been the same: death by ritual fire to purify the corruption they represent. The chamber erupted in shocked voices as delegates from dozens of species began talking at once. Many had never heard of ritual execution being used against diplomatic personnel. Dr. Kim grabbed Captain Park's arm and whispered urgently, "We need to leave now. This is not legal under any interpretation of Council law," but it was already too late. Velthari guards moved to block all the exits while Council security surrounded the human delegation. Lee Do-hyun tried to push through toward Minho, but a Velthari guard stunned him with an energy weapon, and he collapsed to the floor. Minho stood perfectly still as the guards approached him. He knew that any resistance would be used to justify what was happening and might endanger his team. "This is murder," he said clearly so that every delegate in the chamber could hear him. "I am a diplomatic representative under Council protection. You have no legal authority to harm me." Councillor Thiss walked down from the podium until he stood directly in front of Minho. "Legal authority comes from power, young human. The Velthari Empire has power and humanity does not. That is the only law that truly matters in this galaxy." The guards dragged Minho toward a side chamber that had been prepared specifically for this moment. Captain Park tried to follow, but more guards blocked her path. "Let me see him," she demanded. "As his commanding officer, I have the right to witness any proceedings." Theiss considered this request for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. Let the human captain watch so she can report what happens to aggressive species who challenge the established order." The side chamber contained an ancient stone altar surrounded by metal braziers filled with chemical fuel. The setup had been prepared in advance, proving that the Council had planned this execution before the hearing even began. Minho was forced to kneel beside the altar while Thiss began speaking in the old Velthari language. Captain Park activated her communicator and opened a channel to the determination. "All stations, this is Park. Priority Alpha transmission to Earth Command begins now." The guard stripped away Minho's diplomatic uniform and bound his hands behind his back. He looked directly at Captain Park and spoke in a calm, clear voice. "Tell Earth that we tried to do this peacefully. Tell them we followed every law and showed respect for every tradition. Tell them what the Council really thinks of justice." This finished his ritual words and gestured to the guards. They lifted Minho onto the altar and began pouring the chemical fuel around him. The smell was sharp and toxic in the enclosed chamber. Other Council members filed in to witness the execution as if this were a normal part of diplomatic proceedings. "Any final words before purification?" Theiss asked mockingly. Minho looked up at the viewing gallery where representatives from dozens of species watched in horrified silence. His voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "I die as a representative of humanity seeking peace through law and evidence. Remember that we tried diplomacy first. Remember that we showed respect for your traditions even when you showed none for our rights. And remember this moment when you wonder why humanity chose a different path." The guards ignited the fuel, and flames roared up around the altar. Minho did not scream even as the fire consumed him. His final words were broadcast across subspace to every human ship and colony in known space. The emergency session of the United Earth Government convened 18 hours after the execution video reached Earth. President Kang Hyuk had not slept since watching Ambassador Han Minho burn alive on the floor of the Galactic Council chamber. The images played over and over in his mind as he walked into the secure conference room, deep beneath the Capitol building. Admiral Cho Tae-hwan was already seated at the massive oval table, reviewing tactical reports on his datapad. The Admiral was a thin man with gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He had been preparing for this moment ever since humanity first made contact with the Galactic Council 15 years ago. Too many alien species looked at humans like dangerous animals that needed to be controlled. General Yoon Minji arrived next, carrying a sealed briefcase that contained humanity's most classified military secrets. She had been the youngest person ever promoted to head strategic command, and her reputation for unconventional thinking had made her many enemies among traditional military leaders. Today, those same qualities might save human civilization. Dr. Lim Seung-ho entered the room with 2 assistants carrying portable computer terminals. As director of the Weapons Research Division, he oversaw projects that officially did not exist. His team had been developing theoretical weapon systems that the Galactic Council believed were beyond human capabilities. The theory phase was about to end. President Kang took his seat at the head of the table and activated the room's security systems. Energy shields sealed the chamber, and jamming fields blocked any attempt at electronic surveillance. What they discussed in the next few hours would determine whether humanity survived as a free species or became a cautionary tale for other young civilizations. "Show me the video one more time," the president said quietly. Admiral Cho activated. The holographic display and the execution played out in perfect detail. They watched Minho present his evidence with professional dignity. They watched Counselor Thys dismiss human rights with contempt. They watched their friend and colleague burn alive while alien delegates stood by and did nothing. When it ended, General Yoon spoke first. "The transmission analysis confirms this. Was planned in advance. The execution chamber had been prepared before the hearing began. The council never intended to consider our evidence fairly." Dr. Lim nodded grimly. "The chemical composition of the fuel suggests it was designed to burn slowly and cause maximum pain. This was not just execution. This was torture meant to send a message to other species who might challenge council authority." President Kang studied the faces around the table. Each of these people had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity through legal and diplomatic means. Now they were being asked to consider alternatives that went against everything they believed about civilized behavior. "What are our military options?" he asked Admiral Cho. The Admiral touched his datapad and new displays appeared showing ship positions throughout human space. "Official fleet strength is 68 heavy cruisers and 215 support vessels. The Council estimates our total military capacity at approximately 50 combat-ready ships." He paused and looked directly at the president. "They are wrong by a factor of 8. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. General Yoon activated her own display showing a 3-dimensional map of hidden human installations. "Operation Deep Harbor has been running for 12 years. We have 47 concealed shipyards and asteroid belts throughout human space. Total hidden fleet strength is 418 heavy combat vessels plus supporting craft." President Kang stared at the display in amazement. He had authorized the program but never imagined it had grown so large. "How did we keep this secret from Council intelligence?" "We learned from our history," Dr. Lim replied. During the Second World War, humans developed extensive deception programs to hide military preparations from enemies. We applied those same techniques on a galactic scale. Every merchant vessel that travels through Council space carries passive sensors and communication relays. We have been mapping their defenses and monitoring their communications for 15 years. Admiral Cho brought up another display showing detailed intelligence on Council military forces. "We know the location of every major fleet base, every supply depot, and every command center in their territory. We also know something they do not expect. Human ship crews train in combat tactics during routine merchant runs. Every cargo captain can fight if necessary." General Yoon opened her briefcase and removed a data crystal that glowed with internal light. "This contains the complete battle plan for Operation Righteous Fury. Instead of defending our colonies, we Abandon them and strike directly at Council infrastructure. They expect us to fight like other species. They expect us to protect our territory and wait for them to attack. She inserted the crystal into the table's central computer, and strategic projections filled the air above them. Red lines showed human strike forces moving simultaneously against 12 different Council systems. We hit communication networks first to prevent coordinated response, then supply lines to create chaos in their logistics, finally command centers to destroy their ability to govern effectively. President Kang studied the projections carefully. The plan was brilliant and completely ruthless. It would cripple Council authority throughout the galaxy, but it would also make humanity the aggressor in a galactic war. Casualties, he asked quietly. Minimal civilian losses if we execute properly, Admiral Cho replied. We target infrastructure, not population centers. Military casualties will be heavy on both sides, but the war will be short. Council forces are designed to maintain order, not fight a peer conflict against an enemy that refuses to follow conventional tactics. Dr. Lim activated his own display, showing weapon systems that looked like something from a nightmare. We have also developed strategic weapons for use against systems that resist too strongly. Nova bombs can destabilize stellar cores and make entire systems uninhabitable. Quantum viruses can destroy electronic infrastructure across light years of space. We have not tested these weapons, but computer models suggest they will work as designed. The president felt a chill run down his spine. These were not just weapons of war, but tools for genocide on a scale that defied imagination. Are we seriously considering the destruction of entire star systems? Only if they force us to, General Yoon replied. The Velthari Empire has over 200 colony worlds. If they continue to resist after we demonstrate our capabilities, we may need to make examples that convince other species to surrender. The room fell silent again as everyone contemplated the magnitude of what they were discussing. Dr. Lim brought up one final display showing long-range strategic projections. There is another option. We can use our hidden fleet and advanced weapons to completely dismantle the Galactic Council power structure. Instead of conquest, we offer liberation to species that have been oppressed by the current system. Admiral Cho nodded thoughtfully. Many young species fear the Council but lack the military strength to resist. If we position ourselves as liberators rather than conquerors, we might gain allies instead of creating more enemies. President Kang stood and walked to the viewing window that looked out over the capital city. Millions of people went about their daily lives unaware that their government was planning the largest war in galactic history. If we do this, there is no going back. Humanity will be marked as the species that destroyed the oldest political institution in known space. They marked us when they burned our diplomat alive, General Yoon said firmly. The Council made their choice when they decided that human rights meant nothing compared to alien traditions. Now they get to live with the consequences. The president returned to his seat and looked at each member of his war council. These were good people who had been pushed beyond the breaking point by an act of pure evil. Dr. Lim, how long before your weapons are ready for deployment? Nova bombs can be completed in 6 weeks. Quantum viruses are ready now. Hidden fleet modifications will take 3 months to finish. Admiral Cho, how long before we can begin offensive operations? First strike capabilities are ready in 48 hours. Full campaign deployment requires 60 days. President Kang took a deep breath and made the decision that would change galactic history. Begin immediate preparation for Operation Righteous Fury. Target priority is Council communication and command. Infrastructure. Rules of engagement authorize all necessary force to complete mission objectives, but civilian casualties must be minimized. He paused and looked directly at each person around the table. We are not conquerors. We are liberators. Our goal is not to rule the galaxy, but to free it from a system that murders diplomats and oppresses young species. When this is over, we will establish a new galactic government based on equality and justice. General Yoon sealed her briefcase and stood to leave. What about the 30-day deadline for withdrawing from the disputed systems? We withdraw, the president replied. Let them think they have won. Let them believe that humanity will submit to their authority. When we are ready, we will show them what happens when they mistake mercy for weakness. As the War Council dispersed to begin their preparations, none of them realized that they were about to start the shortest and most decisive conflict in galactic history. Captain Nam Ji-hoon stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution and watched the stars bend around his ship as it dropped out of hyperspace. The massive dreadnought emerged into normal space only 3 million kilometers from Alderaan Prime, the heavily fortified capital world of the Velthari Empire. Around him, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency as they prepared for humanity's first major battle against the Galactic Council. All systems nominal, reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Park Min-seok. Stealth fields are holding and enemy sensors show no detection. Strike Force Alpha is in position. Captain Nam nodded and activated the fleet communication system. 47 other human warships materialized around the Retribution as their stealth systems deactivated simultaneously. The hidden fleet that had been 15 years in the making was finally revealing itself to the galaxy. "This is Retribution Actual to all ships," Nam broadcast on the command frequency. "Today we begin Operation Righteous Fury. Our target is not conquest but liberation. We fight not for territory but for justice. Remember Ambassador Han Minho and show these aliens what happens when they mistake human mercy for human weakness." The response from 47 ship captains was immediate and unanimous. For Minho. 3 light hours away, Commander Osora guided her squadron of Ghost-class stealth fighters through the outer defense perimeter of the Council's central command station. The massive structure orbited a red giant star and contained the communication hub that coordinated Council military operations across 12 sectors. Her mission was to infiltrate the station and steal every piece of classified data she could find. "Ghost leader to all units," she whispered into her helmet communicator. "Primary defenses are automated as expected. Council military doctrine assumes no enemy would be crazy enough to attack their capital. Today they learn why that assumption was wrong." Her fighter was invisible to normal sensors and small enough to hide among the constant traffic of maintenance drones around the station. Behind her, 11 other pilots followed in perfect formation as they approached the docking bay that their intelligence had identified as the least defended access point. Lieutenant Commander Kim Young-ho monitored the approach from his position in the fighter's electronic warfare suite. Enemy communication traffic is normal. No signs they suspect anything. Intelligence was right about their overconfidence. The Ghost Squadron slipped through the station's outer hull using cutting tools that left no trace of their entry. Within minutes, they were moving through maintenance corridors toward the central computer core. Council security was designed to prevent large-scale invasion, not infiltration by small teams of specialists. On the surface of Kepler Station, Colonel Bei Jinwoo led 200 human Marines in the most complex liberation operation in military history. The orbital facility housed over 3,000 enslaved beings from a dozen different species that the Council classified as primitive or dangerous. Most had been captured during so-called pacification missions when their worlds resisted Council authority. "Remember the rules of engagement," Colonel Bei told his troops as they moved through the station's lower levels. "Minimum force against Council personnel. Zero tolerance for anyone who harms the prisoners. We are here to liberate, not to conquer, Sergeant." Lee Hanul kicked open a cell door and found 12 members of a reptilian species that humans had never encountered before. They cowered in the corner, expecting more abuse from their captors. "It's okay," she said gently. "We are humans. We are here to take you home." The aliens looked at her with confusion and hope. Most had been prisoners for years and had given up any expectation of rescue. The Council had told them that their species were too primitive for membership and would remain in protective custody indefinitely. "Can you understand me?" Lee asked. One of the aliens nodded slowly and spoke in broken Galactic Standard. You fight Council. Why you help us?" "Because everyone deserves to be free," she replied. That is what humans believe. Back in the Alderaan system, the Battle of Alderaan Prime was beginning in earnest. The orbital defense platforms that protected the Velthari homeworld were considered impregnable by military experts throughout the galaxy. 50 massive battle stations surrounded the planet in overlapping fields of fire, with enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. Captain Nam studied the tactical display and smiled grimly. Conventional wisdom says those platforms cannot be defeated by direct assault. Good thing we are not conventional. He activated the ship's primary weapon system. The Retribution carried experimental railguns that accelerated projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. The kinetic energy was enough to shatter any known defensive system, but the weapons required enormous amounts of power and could only fire a few shots before overheating. Target the command platform first, he ordered. One shot should convince them that resistance is futile. The railgun fired and a stream of accelerated metal crossed 3 million kilometers in less than a second. The massive defense platform simply vanished in a flash of converted matter as the projectile struck with the force of a nuclear weapon. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface. Enemy communications are going crazy, reported Lieutenant Park. They are demanding to know what kind of weapon we used. Council military archives have no record of anything like this. Tell them it's a human invention. Captain Nam replied. Tell them they can surrender now or we can demonstrate what our other weapons can do. The remaining defense platforms opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams and missile swarms filled the space around the human fleet, but the attacks were poorly coordinated. Council military doctrine had not been updated in centuries, and their commanders had no experience fighting an enemy that could destroy their strongest defenses with single shots. Commander Osora and her Ghost Squadron had reached the central computer core of the Council command station. The facility was protected by automated security systems, but the designers had never considered the possibility of infiltrators who could hack alien computer networks in real time. Jackpot, whispered Lieutenant Commander Kim as his equipment interfaced with the station's databanks. I have access to their entire military database. Ship positions, fleet strengths, communication codes, everything. Commander O activated her suit's recording systems and began documenting everything they found. The data would be transmitted to Earth as soon as they escaped, but she wanted redundant copies in case something went wrong. Download everything and prepare charges for selective destruction. We want to cripple their communications but leave evidence of what we found. The intelligence windfall was beyond their most optimistic projections. The Council had detailed files on every member species, including military capabilities, political weaknesses, and economic dependencies. They also had secret agreements with criminal organizations and evidence of war crimes that would shock the galaxy if revealed. Commander, we have a problem, reported one of her pilots. Council security just went to maximum alert. They know someone is in the station. O checked her chronometer and realized they had been inside for over an hour. All units prepare for emergency extraction. Kim, how much more time do you need? Give me 5 minutes and I can download their complete intelligence. Archive. This includes blackmail material on half the species in the galaxy. You have 3 minutes. After that we leave whether you are finished or not. On Kepler Station, Colonel Bay and his Marines had liberated over 2,000 prisoners and were fighting their way toward the remaining detention blocks. Council security forces were putting up fierce resistance, but they were outnumbered and outgunned by troops who fought with the fury of the righteous. Control, this is Bay, he reported over the tactical network. We have found evidence of systematic torture and medical experimentation on prisoners. Some of these beings have been held for over 20 years without trial or legal representation. The colonel paused as he watched his medics treating aliens who had been deliberately starved and abused. Request permission to expand mission parameters. We need to document everything and arrest the personnel responsible for these crimes. The response from Earth Command was immediate. Permission granted. Gather all evidence and prepare criminal charges under interstellar law. These bastards are going to face justice. In the Alderaan system, the battle was entering its final phase. 37 of the 50 defense platforms had been destroyed and the remainder were surrendering as fast as their crews could activate emergency beacons. The Velthari fleet was in full retreat toward the outer system with human ships in pursuit. Captain Nam opened a communication channel to the planet's surface. Attention Velthari High Command. This is Captain Nam Jahoon of the Human Defense Force. Your orbital defenses have been neutralized and your fleet is retreating. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally, or we will demonstrate what our strategic weapons can do to planetary targets." The response came quickly from Counselor Theiss himself. His voice carried rage and disbelief in equal measure. "This is impossible. Council intelligence reported that humans have fewer than 50 combat ships. How do you have such advanced weapons?" "We have been preparing for this war since the day we joined your council," Nam replied. "We hoped diplomacy would work, but we planned for the possibility that it would no." 8 months after the execution of Ambassador Han Minho, the human fleet hung in orbit around Nexus Prime like a constellation of metal stars. Admiral Cho Tae-hwan stood on the bridge of the flagship UES Liberation and watched the greatest city in galactic history surrender to forces that had not existed when the war began. The ancient towers and orbital platforms that had housed the Galactic Council for thousands of years now flew white flags of defeat. Ambassador Wang Sunmi prepared for the most important diplomatic mission in human history. She had been chosen to replace Minho not because she was the most experienced diplomat, but because she understood what the galaxy needed to hear. Earth wanted justice, not revenge, and liberation, not conquest. Today she would stand where her predecessor had died and announce the birth of a new galactic order. The war had been shorter than anyone expected, and more decisive than the Council had thought possible. Human forces had destroyed or captured every major Council installation in 12 star systems. Their fleets were scattered, their governments had collapsed, and their authority had been shattered beyond repair. More importantly, the intelligence, gathered by Commander O and her Ghost Squadron, had revealed corruption and oppression on a scale that shocked even humanity's supporters. Admiral Cho to all fleet commanders, the Admiral broadcast on the command frequency. "Today we complete Operation Righteous Fury. Our mission was never conquest, our goal was always liberation. In 1 hour, Ambassador Wang will announce the formation of a new galactic government based on equality and justice for all species." The response from hundreds of ship captains was immediate and unified. For Minho, for justice, for freedom on the surface of Nexus Prime. The surviving members of the Galactic Council waited in what had once been their chamber of absolute power. Most of the ancient leaders had fled or committed suicide rather than face human justice. Those who remained did so because they hoped to negotiate some form of continued authority in whatever came next. Counselor Theiss sat in shackles at the same podium where he had ordered Minho's execution. The ancient Velthari looked older than his thousands of years as he contemplated the complete destruction of everything his species had built. Around him, representatives from dozens of species waited to learn their fate under human rule. Dr. Kim So-min entered the chamber, carrying data files that contained evidence of every council crime discovered during the war. As the head of the human investigation team, she had spent 8 months documenting atrocities that spanned centuries of council rule. Her report would determine which species faced criminal charges and which could be trusted with continued self-governance. "The evidence is overwhelming," she announced to the assembled delegates. "Systematic slavery of young species, deliberate suppression of technological development, economic exploitation designed to maintain council supremacy, and murder of diplomatic personnel who challenged their authority." She activated the holographic display and images filled the chamber. Enslaved beings in council detention centers, destroyed colonies that had resisted council demands, secret agreements that divided up the galaxy among the oldest and most powerful species. The evidence was damning and irrefutable. However, Dr. Kim continued, the investigation also found species and individuals who opposed these crimes or tried to limit their scope. The human government has decided that justice requires distinguishing between those who supported oppression and those who resisted it. Captain Park Ji-won stood guard beside the main entrance as delegations from across the galaxy filed into the chamber. Many were representatives of species that had been oppressed by the Council and now looked to humanity for leadership. Others came from worlds that had supported Council authority and feared human revenge. The captain carried the same sidearm she had worn during Minho's final mission, but today her weapon remained holstered. The war was over, and humanity had won, not just through superior firepower, but through moral authority that could not be challenged. Ambassador Wang entered the chamber and walked to the central podium, where Minho had made his final arguments for peace. She wore a simple black uniform that honored the memory of her predecessor, while symbolizing humanity's determination to build something better from the ashes of the old order. 8 months ago, Ambassador Han Minho died in this chamber, she began. He was burned alive for the crime of presenting evidence and asking for justice. His murder was meant to send a message to young species throughout the galaxy. That message was received and answered. The chamber fell silent as delegates remembered the day that changed everything. Many had watched the execution in horror, but none had found the courage to protest. Today they faced the consequences of their silence. The war that followed was not fought for conquest or revenge. Human forces targeted infrastructure, not populations. We sought to liberate, not to dominate. Every action was designed to minimize civilian casualties while maximizing damage to the systems that supported oppression. Ambassador Wang activated her own display showing maps of liberated worlds throughout former Council space. Green markers indicated systems where young species had thrown off Council authority and established free governments. Blue markers showed worlds where human forces had removed corrupt leadership and allowed local populations to choose their own representatives. Today, I announce the formation of the Democratic Federation of Free Worlds. Membership is open to any species that accepts 3 fundamental principles. First, all sapient beings have inherent rights that cannot be violated by any authority. Second, disputes between species must be resolved through evidence and law, not tradition and power. Third, no species may claim superiority over another based on age, technology, or political influence. She paused and looked directly at the surviving council members. The old order is dead. The age of rule by ancient tradition and inherited privilege has ended. The galaxy will be governed by representatives chosen freely by the beings they serve. Councillor Thys struggled to his feet despite his shackles and spoke in a voice cracked with age and defeat. You cannot simply destroy thousands of years of stability and tradition. The galaxy needs the wisdom of elder species to maintain order among the young and aggressive races. Ambassador Wang turned her steady gaze on the ancient Velthari. The galaxy tried your wisdom and found it wanting. Under council rule, young species were enslaved. Independent worlds were conquered. Diplomatic personnel were murdered. This is not wisdom. This is tyranny disguised as tradition. She gestured toward the viewing gallery where representatives from over 40 species watched the proceedings. These beings will decide their own futures. They will choose their own leaders. They will make their own laws. And they will do so as equals regardless of when their species achieved spaceflight. Dr. Kim stepped forward and announced the results of the war crimes investigation. The following species and individuals are charged with crimes against galactic civilization. The Velthari Empire faces charges of systematic oppression and diplomatic murder. The Korath Collective faces charges of slave trading and genocide. The Nexus Hegemony faces charges of economic exploitation and technological suppression. She read through a list of over 200 specific charges against various council members and their governments. Each accusation was supported by evidence gathered during the war and would be tried in courts established under the new galactic legal system. However, Dr. Kim continued, 17 species are found to have opposed council crimes or worked to limit their scope. These civilizations will be offered full membership in the Democratic Federation, with no penalties for their previous association with the council. The announcement caused excited discussions throughout the chamber, as representatives realized that humanity was offering partnership rather than demanding submission. This was not the behavior of conquerors, but of liberators who meant what they said about equality and justice. Ambassador Wang returned to the podium for her final announcement. The headquarters of the Democratic Federation will be established on New Geneva, a neutral world in the Tau Ceti system. Every member species will have equal representation regardless of size, population, or military strength. Decisions will be made by majority vote with protections for minority rights built into the charter. She paused and looked around the chamber one final time. The execution of Ambassador Han Minho was meant to teach the galaxy about power. Today, his death has taught a different lesson about justice. When peaceful species are murdered for seeking their rights, the The response should not be submission, but revolution. The ceremony concluded with the formal dissolution of the Galactic Council and the transfer of authority to interim human administrators who would oversee the transition to democratic government. Within hours, delegations from 37 species had requested membership in the new federation. Councillor Thys and 63 other council members were transported to secure facilities where they would await trial for war crimes. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and most would spend their remaining years in prison. Their personal wealth would be used to compensate the victims of their oppression. As the human fleet prepared to leave Nexus Prime, Admiral Cho received a message from Earth Command. Mission accomplished. Return home for heroes welcome. The galaxy is free.